My daughter-in-law said my son's birthday was canceled. I found out she secretly excluded me and spent $5,000 on my credit card. The next day, I gave her a surprise she'll never forget. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Lucille, and at 65, I thought I'd seen every kind of betrayal life could offer. I was wrong. It started with a phone call on a Tuesday morning. My daughter-in-law Lyra's voice was sugar-sweet, the way it always got when she was about to deliver bad news wrapped in false concern. "Oh, Lucille, I'm so sorry to tell you this," she said, and I could practically hear her smiling through the phone. "David's birthday party this weekend? We had to cancel it. You know how it is with his work schedule." My heart sank. I'd been looking forward to celebrating my son's 38th birthday for weeks. I'd already bought his gift, a vintage watch that had belonged to his grandfather, and spent hours planning what I'd wear, what I'd bring. At my age, these family gatherings meant everything to me. "Cancel it?" I repeated, trying to keep the disappointment out of my voice. "Is everything all right? Is David okay?" "Oh, he's fine," Lyra said quickly. "Just overwhelmed with work. You know how he gets. We'll do something small. Just the three of us. Maybe next month we can plan something bigger." Something about her tone bothered me, but I couldn't put my finger on what. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at the wrapped gift on my counter. The house felt emptier somehow, the silence pressing against my chest. I decided to call David directly. Maybe I could take him to lunch instead, just the two of us. But his phone went straight to voicemail. I tried again an hour later. Same thing. By Thursday, I still hadn't heard from him. This wasn't like David. Even when he was busy, he usually returned my calls within a day. A cold worry began growing in my stomach. Friday afternoon, I was paying bills when I noticed something strange on my credit card statement. There was a charge for $5,000 to Premier Party Planning dated just 3 days ago. My hands started shaking as I stared at the numbers on the screen. I called the credit card company immediately. "Ma'am," the representative said after pulling up my account, "that charge was made using a card linked to your account. The additional cardholder name is Lyra Patterson. Lyra. I'd added her to my credit card 2 years ago when David was between jobs, and they were struggling. I'd forgotten to remove her access when his situation improved." "Can you tell me what this charge was for?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I can only see the merchant name. You'd need to contact them directly for details." My hands were trembling as I dialed Premier Party Planning. A cheerful voice answered on the second ring. "Hi, I'm calling about a recent charge to my credit card," I said. "For $5,000. Can you tell me what this was for?" "Of course. Let me pull that up. Oh yes, the Patterson party this Saturday. Catering for 50 guests, florals, entertainment, the works. It's going to be beautiful." The room started spinning. "The Patterson party? This Saturday?" "Yes, ma'am. Birthday celebration for a David Patterson. Is there something wrong with the order?" I hung up without answering. My legs gave out, and I sank onto my kitchen chair, staring at the phone in my hand like it was a weapon that had just wounded me. The party wasn't canceled. It was happening tomorrow. Lyra had spent $5,000 of my money on a party for my son's birthday, and told me it was canceled so I wouldn't come. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Not just the money, though $5,000 was significant for someone on a fixed income like me, but the deliberate cruelty of it. She'd stolen from me to fund a celebration I was intentionally excluded from. I sat there for what felt like hours, tears streaming down my face. How long had this been going on? How many other times had I been lied to, manipulated, pushed aside? The worst part was imagining David's face when people asked where I was. What had Lyra told him? What excuse had she made for my absence? As the sun sat outside my kitchen window, something shifted inside me. The tears stopped. The hurt began transforming into something else, something harder, more focused. Lyra thought she was clever. She thought she could manipulate an old woman, steal from me, and keep me from my own son. She thought I'd just accept whatever story she fed me and fade quietly into the background. She was about to learn how wrong she was. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lyra's face, heard her voice delivering that perfectly rehearsed lie about the canceled party. By dawn, I'd made a decision. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. Saturday morning, I drove to David and Lyra's neighborhood. Not to crash the party, I had more dignity than that, but to see for myself what my money had bought. I parked 3 houses down, far enough away to avoid being seen but close enough to watch. At 10 a.m., a catering truck pulled up, then another. A florist van followed, then a company I recognized as the same one that had provided entertainment for my neighbor's granddaughter's wedding last year. These weren't the signs of a small, intimate gathering Lyra had described. I sat in my car, watching strangers carry arrangements of flowers I'd unknowingly paid for into my son's house. White roses and blue hydrangeas, David's favorite colors, ones I'd told Lyra about years ago. Even the flowers were a twisted reminder of how well she knew what mattered to me. By noon, guests started arriving. I recognized some faces, David's colleagues, Lyra's sister, a few neighbors, all people who would naturally ask about my absence. My stomach clenched as I imagined the conversations happening inside. Around 2 p.m., I couldn't stand it anymore. I needed to know what story Lyra had constructed about my absence. I called my friend Margaret, whose daughter worked with one of David's colleagues. "Margaret," I said, trying to keep my voice casual, "could you ask Sarah if she's been to any nice parties lately? I'm looking for catering recommendations." 20 minutes later, Margaret called back. Sarah said she was just at a lovely birthday party for her colleague David. She was surprised his mother wasn't there, though. Apparently, the wife mentioned that you'd had some kind of medical episode and couldn't make it. A medical episode. My blood pressure spiked. Not only had Lyra excluded me, she'd created a lie that made me seem frail, unreliable. She was rewriting my identity to suit her narrative. I thanked Margaret and hung up, my hands shaking with rage. Then I called my doctor's office. "Dr. Reynolds' office, this is Jenny." "Hi, Jenny. This is Lucille Hayes. I need to ask a favor. If anyone calls asking about my health, please confirm that I'm perfectly fine and haven't had any medical issues recently." Jenny sounded confused. "Of course, Mrs. Hayes. Is everything all right?" "I'm fine. Just some family miscommunication I need to clear up." But I wasn't fine. I was furious, humiliated, and something else I hadn't felt in years, determined. Sunday morning, I began my real investigation. I went through my credit card statements from the past year, looking for charges I didn't recognize. What I found made my stomach turn. Small amounts here and there, $200 for miscellaneous household items, $150 for children's clothing for my grandson Tommy, clothes I'd never seen him wear, $89 for restaurants I'd never been to. Nothing large enough to catch my attention individually, but together, nearly $2,000 over 12 months. She'd been stealing from me systematically, in amounts too small to notice unless you were looking for them. I called the credit card company again and requested detailed merchant information for every charge. Some were legitimate, groceries when David was unemployed, gas when their car broke down, but others were pure theft. Expensive cosmetics, clothing from boutiques I'd never heard of, even a spa day. Lyra had been living partially off my money while telling everyone what a burden I was becoming. The phone rang Tuesday afternoon. David's number. "Hi, Mom." His voice sounded tired. "I'm sorry I missed your calls last week. Work has been crazy." "I'm sure it has," I said carefully. "How was your birthday?" A pause. "Oh, that. Yeah, Lyra said you weren't feeling well. Are you okay? She mentioned you had some kind of episode." There it was. The lie, delivered through my own son's concerned voice. "David," I said slowly, "I'm perfectly healthy. I had no medical episode. I was told your party was canceled." Silence stretched between us. I could almost hear him processing what I'd said. "Mom, what do you mean canceled? We had the party Saturday. Lyra said she called you about being sick." My heart broke a little more. My son genuinely believed his wife's story. He thought I'd been too ill to attend his birthday. "David, honey, she told me the party was canceled because of your work schedule. I never said I was sick." Another long pause. "That doesn't make sense. Why would she—" "Mom, are you sure?" "I'm very sure. In fact, I'm sure about several things I think you should know." I took a deep breath. What I said next would change everything between us. but I couldn't protect him from the truth anymore. David, I need you to come over, alone. There are some things about your wife that you need to see. David came over that evening, and what followed was one of the most difficult conversations I'd ever had with my son. I showed him the credit card statements, the charges, the timeline of Lyra's lies. I watched his face change from confusion to disbelief to something harder to read. "Mom, there has to be an explanation," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Maybe she was trying to protect you from something. Maybe she thought—" "David," I interrupted gently, "what could she possibly be protecting me from? My own son's birthday party?" He stared at the papers spread across my kitchen table. "I don't understand why she would do this." I didn't answer. Some realizations a person has to come to on their own. He left that night promising to talk to Lyra, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. My son was a good man, but he'd been married to her for 8 years. People don't want to believe they've been blind to their spouse's true nature. Over the next 2 weeks, things got worse. David's calls became less frequent. When he did call, he sounded strained, like he was walking on eggshells. I could picture Lyra in the background, coaching him on what to say, controlling the narrative even after being exposed. Then came the phone call that changed everything. "Grandma Lucille!" Tommy's excited 7-year-old voice burst through the phone. "Guess what? Mom said we might go to Disney World for Christmas." My heart clenched. "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart." "She said it depends on whether we have enough money saved up. Dad's been working so much and Mom says money is tight." Money is tight. While she'd spent $5,000 of my money on a party I wasn't invited to, and skimmed hundreds more over the past year. "Tommy, can you put your dad on the phone?" "He's not here, Grandma. He's been staying late at work a lot. Mom says he's stressed about money." After I hung up, I sat in my living room staring at the family photos on my mantle. Pictures of David as a baby, his graduation, his wedding day. In every photo from his wedding forward, Lyra had somehow positioned herself between David and me. I'd thought it was coincidence at the time. That night, I made a decision that surprised even me. The next morning, I walked into my local travel agency. "I'd like to book a trip to Greece," I told the agent. "For 3 people, 2 adults and 1 child." "How wonderful. When were you thinking of traveling?" "As soon as possible. Within the next 2 weeks if you can manage it." The agent, a kind woman named Patricia, pulled up options on her computer. "I have a lovely package to Athens and the Greek islands. 2 weeks includes flights, hotels, and some guided tours. Perfect for a family trip." I smiled. "It's not for a family exactly. It's for a grandmother, her son, and her grandson. A 3-generation trip. How special. I'm sure they'll love it." As Patricia worked out the details, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Excitement. Real, genuine anticipation instead of dread. That evening, I called David. "I have something I want to discuss with you. Can you come over?" He arrived looking exhausted. The stress was showing on his face in the way he carried his shoulders. "David, when was the last time you took a real vacation?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Mom, I can't afford a vacation right now. Things are tight, and with Christmas coming, what if I told you I've already paid for one? A trip to Greece, for you, me, and Tommy. 2 weeks exploring Athens, seeing the islands, learning about our heritage." His eyes widened. "Mom, you can't afford that." "Actually, I can, and I've already booked it." I pulled out the travel brochures Patricia had given me, pictures of ancient ruins, crystal blue waters, whitewashed buildings climbing hillsides. "This is incredible. But Mom, I can't leave Lyra for 2 weeks. She'll never agree to this." "I'm not asking Lyra to come," I said quietly. "This is for 3 generations of our family. You, me, and Tommy. A chance to reconnect, to remember what we mean to each other without any outside interference." David's face went through several expressions. "You want me to go to Greece without my wife? I want you to spend time with your son and your mother. I want Tommy to learn about his grandfather's heritage. Your father's family came from Crete, you know. I want to show Tommy where his roots come from." I could see David wavering. The photos were beautiful, and I knew how much he'd always wanted to travel. When we'd been struggling financially during his childhood, I'd promised him that someday we'd take a trip together to see the world. What would I tell Lyra? "You tell her the truth, that your mother is getting older, And this might be one of the last chances we have to take a trip like this together. That Tommy deserves to know his heritage, that sometimes men need time with their family without their wives. The last part was manipulation, but I was past caring about playing fair. Lyra certainly hadn't. I don't know, Mom. David, when was the last time you saw Tommy really excited about spending time with you? Not distracted by video games or his mother's plans, but genuinely excited to be with his father. That hit home. I could see it in his face. The trip is in 10 days, I said. Think about it. 3 days later, he called. Okay, Mom, let's go to Greece. I could hear Lyra in the background, her voice sharp and argumentative. But David's decision was made. The next week was a whirlwind of preparation. Lyra called me twice, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. Lucille, this is really inappropriate. Taking my husband away for 2 weeks without consulting me. I consulted David, I replied calmly. He's an adult who can make his own decisions. What about Tommy's school? It's educational travel. His teacher thinks it's a wonderful opportunity. She hung up on me, but I didn't care. For the first time in years, I felt like I was fighting back instead of just enduring. And in 10 days, I'd have 2 weeks alone with my son and grandson, away from Lyra's influence, to help David see what his marriage had really become. The moment we stepped off the plane in Athens, I saw something in David I hadn't seen in years. Genuine relaxation. His shoulders dropped, the tension lines around his eyes softened, and when Tommy grabbed his hand excitedly, pointing at everything around him, David actually smiled, really smiled. Grandma, look how blue the sky is. Tommy bounced beside me as we waited for our luggage. It's like someone painted it. Wait until you see the water, I told him, remembering the brochures. It's even bluer. Our hotel was perfect, a family-run place Patricia had recommended overlooking the Acropolis. That first evening, we sat on the rooftop terrace eating dinner as the Parthenon glowed golden in the sunset. I can't believe we're really here, David said, and for the first time in months, he wasn't checking his phone every few minutes. Your grandfather would have loved this, I told him. He used to tell me stories his father told him about Crete. About fishing boats and olive groves. Tommy leaned forward, fascinated. Tell me about great-great-grandfather. For the next hour, I shared family stories David hadn't heard since he was Tommy's age. Stories about courage, about leaving everything behind to build a new life, about the importance of family loyalty. David listened as intently as his son. The second day, we toured the Acropolis. Tommy was amazed by the ancient stones, the columns that had stood for thousands of years. David kept taking pictures, but not the kind you take to show other people. The kind you take to remember moments. Dad, can we come back here when I'm older? Tommy asked as we climbed down from the Parthenon. Maybe we can make it a tradition, David said, then looked at me. What do you think, Mom? A Greece trip every few years? My heart swelled. I think that sounds perfect. That evening, David called home while Tommy was in the shower. I tried not to listen, but our hotel room was small, and Lyra's voice carried through the phone even from across the room. When are you coming back exactly? Her tone was sharp, demanding. We still have 10 days, Lyra. I told you that. Tommy's missing too much school, and I need help with the house projects. The house projects can wait. Really? Because I've been looking at the credit card bills, and there are some charges we need to discuss when you get back. I froze. Was she going to confess about the unauthorized charges, or was she planning some new manipulation? What kind of charges? David's voice had changed, become more careful. Just things that don't make sense. We'll talk when you get home. After he hung up, David was quiet for a long time. Tommy emerged from the bathroom, chattering about the day's adventures, but I could see David's mind was elsewhere. The third day, we took a boat to one of the islands. The water was impossibly blue, just as I'd promised Tommy. We spent the day swimming, eating fresh fish, and exploring small villages where time seemed to have stopped decades ago. It was there, sitting in a taverna overlooking the harbor, that David finally opened up. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course. Tommy was building sandcastles nearby, close enough to be safe but far enough to give us privacy. When you were married to Dad before he left, Did you ever feel like you were walking on eggshells? Like you had to think carefully about everything you said or did? My heart ached for him. Sometimes. Why? He was quiet for a long moment, watching Tommy play. I feel like that with Lyra sometimes. Like if I say the wrong thing, or make the wrong decision, there's going to be a price to pay. I chose my words carefully. Marriage shouldn't feel like a negotiation where you're always losing. But she has good reasons for the things she gets upset about. Like she worries about money, so she keeps track of spending. She worries about Tommy's education, so she manages his schedule. She worries about our social life, so she handles our calendar. David, who decided she should handle all those things? He looked at me, really looked, and I could see him thinking, I guess it just happened. She said she was better at organizing, and I was busy with work, so you gave up control of your family's money, your son's time, and your social connections. The words hung in the air between us. David stared out at the water, his jaw working like he was chewing on something difficult. That's not how she put it. I'm sure it's not. That night, David was restless. I could hear him moving around the room, checking his phone, then putting it down, then picking it up again. She's called 6 times, he said finally. Are you going to call back? She says it's urgent. At 2 a.m. Greece time, he looked at his phone again, then deliberately turned it off. Whatever it is can wait until morning. The next day, we visited a small village on Crete where my late husband's family had originated. An elderly man at the local cafe spoke some English and remembered the family name. He showed us the old family plot in the village cemetery, headstones weathered smooth by decades of Mediterranean wind. Your people were fishermen, he told David and Tommy. Good people. They took care of each other. Always family first. Tommy traced the worn letters on one of the headstones. They're really my family too. Your blood, the old man said solemnly. Family is the most important thing. Never forget that. Walking back to our hotel that evening, David was unusually quiet. What are you thinking about? I asked. Family, he said. And what it really means. He turned his phone back on, and immediately it started buzzing with missed calls and messages. His face grew tense as he scrolled through them. 14 missed calls, he said. 23 text messages. All from Lyra? He nodded, his expression growing darker as he read. She's really angry, Mom. She says I'm being selfish and irresponsible. She says Tommy's teacher is concerned about his absence, and that I'm setting a bad example by putting pleasure before responsibility. I felt my own anger rising, but I kept my voice calm. What do you think? David looked around at the ancient village, at the peaceful harbor, at his son who was happier and more engaged than I'd seen him in months. I think, he said slowly, that maybe I need to start making some decisions for myself. We'd been in Greece for 8 days when everything unraveled. David had been gradually relaxing, smiling more, actually playing with Tommy instead of constantly checking his phone. I'd watched my son remember who he was underneath all the stress and control. That morning, we were having breakfast on our hotel terrace when David's phone rang. He glanced at it and sighed. It's Lyra. I should probably answer. Of course, I said, though my stomach tightened. I'd been dreading this moment, when reality would intrude on our peaceful bubble. David walked to the far end of the terrace for privacy, but sound carries in the morning air. I tried not to listen while helping Tommy with his cereal, but Lyra's voice was loud enough that I couldn't help overhearing fragments. Completely irresponsible. Tommy's education, what people are saying. David's responses were quieter, apologetic. I watched his shoulders tense up again, that familiar defensive posture returning. The call went on for nearly 20 minutes. When David returned to the table, the lightness was gone from his face. Everything okay? I asked carefully. She's upset about Tommy missing school, and apparently some bills came in that she needs help with. What kind of bills? David rubbed his forehead. I don't know. She said she'd explain when we get back. Something in his tone made me suspicious. David, does Lyra handle all your finances? Most of them. She's better with numbers than I am. But you work. You earn the money. Yeah, but she manages it. Makes sure bills get paid, handles the budget. I've never been good with that stuff. A cold feeling settled in my chest. When was the last time you actually looked at your bank statements? David frowned. I don't know. Lyra sends me summaries. Why? Just curious about how you two divide responsibilities. But I wasn't just curious. I was concerned. Very concerned. That afternoon, while Tommy napped and David showered, his phone buzzed with a text message. It was lying on the table beside me, and the screen lit up automatically. The message was from someone named Brad. Hey man, tried calling you back about the money you asked about. Can't do the $3,000, but I might be able to help with $1,500. Let me know. I stared at the message, my heart racing. David had asked someone for money? But Lyra had just called complaining about bills. Something wasn't adding up. When David came out of the shower, I casually mentioned the text. Someone named Brad texted you about money. David's face went pale. Brad? What did he say? I told him, and watched as confusion and then something like fear crossed his features. I never asked Brad for money, he said slowly. Why would he think? He grabbed his phone and scrolled through his messages. His face grew increasingly pale. Mom, there are texts here I didn't send. To my friends, my coworkers, all asking for loans. My blood ran cold. Show me. He held out the phone. Message after message, sent from David's number, asking various people for money, small amounts, $500 here, $1,000 there, all sent while we'd been in Greece. David, who has access to your phone? Just me. And his face went white. Lyra has all my passwords. She said it was for safety, in case something happened to me. Call your bank right now. With shaking hands, David dialed his bank. I listened as he was transferred from department to department, his face growing more stricken with each conversation. There's been activity on our account, he said when he finally hung up. Large withdrawals, ATM withdrawals from locations near our house. While I've been here. How large? $2,000 yesterday. $1,500 the day before. My mind was racing. David, she's been using your identity to borrow money from your friends and withdrawing cash from your accounts, all while telling you that money is tight and you need to come home to deal with bills. David sat down heavily, staring at his phone like it was a weapon that had been used against him. She's been managing our finances for 3 years, he said quietly. I thought she was helping me. I thought, what else does she manage? Everything. My schedule, Tommy's activities, our social calendar. She said I was too busy to handle all that stuff. The picture was becoming clear, and it was ugly. Lyra hadn't been helping David. She'd been systematically taking control of every aspect of his life. David, I need to tell you something else. Something I should have told you years ago. I told him about the credit card charges, about the party, about all the small thefts over the months. I watched my son's face as the full scope of his wife's deception became clear. She's been stealing from you and from me, I said gently. She's been isolating you from your friends and family. She's been controlling your money, your time, your choices. This isn't marriage, David. This is manipulation. David was quiet for a long time, staring out at the Aegean Sea. Tommy stirred in his sleep, and David automatically reached over to adjust his blanket. Such a natural, loving gesture. What kind of mother does this? He finally asked. What kind of person manipulates their own family this way? The kind who cares more about control than love. David's phone buzzed with another text from Lyra. You need to come home now. There's an emergency with Tommy's school. David showed me the message. There's no emergency, is there? Call the school. He did. The secretary sounded confused. Emergency? No, Mr. Patterson. Tommy's absence was properly excused for educational travel. We hope he's having a wonderful time learning about Greek culture. David hung up and looked at me with something like wonder in his eyes. She's been lying about everything. I'm afraid so. For how long? Probably since the beginning. People like Lyra don't change. They just get better at hiding who they really are. That evening, David made several more phone calls. To his bank, to his friends who'd received the fake messages asking for money, to Tommy's school. Each conversation confirmed what we both now knew. Lyra had been systematically deceiving and manipulating everyone in David's life. I need to go home, he said finally. I need to confront her. We still have 4 days left in Greece. David looked at Tommy, sleeping peacefully in the bed beside us, then at me. Actually, Mom, I think I need these 4 days to figure out what I'm going to say to her. and what I'm going to do about my marriage. For the first time since we'd discovered the truth, I saw something in my son's eyes that gave me hope. Not just anger or hurt, but determination. The determination of a man who'd finally seen the truth and was ready to act on it. The flight home felt different than the one that had brought us to Greece. David was quiet, but it wasn't the defeated quiet I'd grown used to seeing in him over the past few years. This was the quiet of a man preparing for battle. Tommy chattered excitedly about all the things he wanted to tell his mom about our trip. Innocent of the storm waiting at home, I watched David's face as he listened to his son, saw the protective expression that crossed his features. Whatever happened next, David was thinking like a father now, not just a husband. "Mom," David said as our plane began its descent, "whatever happens when we get home, I want you to know this trip changed everything for me. Not just about Lyra, but about what family really means." "What do you mean?" I forgot how good it felt to make decisions without having to justify them to someone. To spend money without being questioned. To just be myself without worrying about the consequences. That's how life should be. I know that now. Lyra was waiting at the airport, her smile bright and artificial. She hugged Tommy enthusiastically and gave David a kiss that looked more like a performance than genuine affection. Her greeting to me was coolly polite. "How was your trip?" she asked, but her eyes were already assessing, looking for signs of what had happened during our time away. "Educational," David said simply. During the drive home, Lyra filled the silence with complaints about how difficult things had been while we were gone. The washing machine had broken, she'd had to handle some crisis at Tommy's school, money had been tight because David wasn't there to manage things. I caught David's eye in the rearview mirror. Each lie was landing differently now that he knew what to listen for. "Speaking of money," David said carefully, "I had some interesting conversations with the bank while we were away." Lyra's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Oh? About what?" "About the withdrawals made from our account while I was out of the country, and about the messages sent from my phone asking friends for loans." The car swerved slightly. "David, I can explain that." "I'm sure you can. I'm looking forward to hearing it." That evening, after Tommy was tucked into bed with stories about ancient Greek gods and marble temples, David and Lyra sat down in their living room. I'd gone home to my own apartment, but David called me an hour later. "She confessed to everything," he said, his voice hollow. "The money, the lies, the manipulation. But she says it was all for our family's good, that I'm too trusting, too naive to handle real-world responsibilities." "What did you say?" "I told her that stealing from my mother and impersonating me to our friends wasn't protecting our family. It was destroying it." "How did she respond?" "She cried, said I was being cruel, that she'd only been trying to help. Then she got angry and said if I didn't appreciate everything she did for us, maybe I should try handling everything myself for a while. And I said maybe I should." Over the next few weeks, David began reclaiming control of his life. He changed all his passwords, took over the family finances, and started making his own decisions about his schedule and Tommy's activities. Lyra fought him every step of the way. She alternated between tears and rage, between playing the victim and making threats. But something fundamental had shifted in David. The man who'd discovered ancient Greek culture and reconnected with his family wasn't willing to go back to being controlled. The confrontation I'd been expecting came 3 weeks after our return. Lyra called me, her voice sharp with fury. "This is all your fault. Lucille, you poisoned him against me with that ridiculous trip." "I didn't have to poison him against you, Lyra. Your own actions did that. You're a bitter old woman who can't stand to see her son happy. If David was truly happy, my opinion wouldn't matter to him. The fact that you're so threatened by his relationship with his mother tells me everything I need to know about your marriage." She hung up on me. But I felt no satisfaction in having the last word. I just felt tired and sad for the family that had been broken by her need for control. David and Lyra entered marriage counseling, though David confided in me that Lyra spent most sessions trying to convince the therapist that David was the one with problems. She painted herself as the overwhelmed wife of an irresponsible husband, conveniently leaving out the theft, the lies, and the systematic isolation. "The counselor isn't buying it," David told me. She keeps asking Lyra why she felt she needed to control so many aspects of my life. Lyra can't answer without admitting that she doesn't trust me to make my own decisions. 6 months later, David made his choice. He filed for divorce, requesting joint custody of Tommy and documentation of all the financial manipulation for the court proceedings. Lyra was furious, vindictive, and desperate. She tried everything, convincing Tommy that his father was abandoning them, spreading rumors to their friends about David's midlife crisis, even attempting to turn David's siblings against him. But David had something now that she couldn't take away: clarity. He knew who he was when he wasn't being controlled, and he wasn't willing to give that up again. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday in spring. That weekend, David, Tommy, and I went to the local Greek festival, where Tommy proudly told everyone about our trip to the real Greece and showed off the few Greek phrases he'd learned. "Yaya," Tommy called me, the Greek word for grandmother that he'd insisted on using since our trip. "Can we go back to Greece next year?" "If your father says yes," I told him. David smiled, the first completely relaxed smile I'd seen from him in years. "I think that sounds perfect." That evening, as we sat in my living room looking through photos from our trip, David said something that made all the pain of the past few years worth it. "Mom, I'm sorry I let her keep us apart for so long. I'm sorry I didn't see what was happening until it was almost too late. You saw it when you needed to see it," I said. "That's what matters. I just want you to know that's never going to happen again. You're Tommy's grandmother, you're my mother, and no one is ever going to convince me that those relationships aren't important." I looked at the photo in my hands. David, Tommy, and me standing in front of the Parthenon, all of us squinting into the Greek sunshine, all of us genuinely happy. "Family," I said, remembering the old man in the Cretan village, "is the most important thing. Never forget that," David finished, and we both smiled. 6 months later, David introduced me to Sarah, a kind woman he'd met at one of Tommy's soccer games. She was a teacher, divorced herself, with 2 children of her own. What struck me most about her was how she lit up when David talked about our Greece trip, how she immediately suggested that blended families need traditions that include everyone. "I'd love to hear more about your family's history," she told me over dinner one night. "Tommy's been teaching my kids some Greek words." As I watched Sarah interact with my grandson, saw how naturally she included me in conversations and plans, I realized something. The right person doesn't see your family as competition or obstacles to overcome. They see them as part of what makes you who you are. Lyra had tried to erase me from David's life because she couldn't control me. Sarah embraced me because she understood that loving David meant loving the people who mattered to him. That night, as I drove home from dinner with David's new family, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Not just the absence of conflict, but genuine contentment. I'd gotten my son back. I'd protected my relationship with my grandson. And I'd learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't dramatic or public. Sometimes it's just living well, loving freely, and refusing to let toxic people steal your joy. Greece had taught us about our heritage, about the importance of family, about standing up for what matters. But mostly it had taught us that some bonds are stronger than any attempt to break them. And that was worth everything. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.